All right, we're back. So the videos didn't work, and it's COMP3025 Winter 2016 semester, and it's week 6, part 2 of our broadcast, and we want to get right into Android Studio again. We did a bit of a walk around last week, but I want to get into it more this week. All right, so again, I've brought up Android Studio here, and I'm going to create a new app, and I want to do some stuff with buttons today. Right, talk about that and binding different things to the to our background, so we can help you with your new app that you're going to build, or the new old app, the revised app that we're going to do. Right. So let's start off a brand new Android Studio project from scratch. So again, you have this menu that comes up, and it looks very similar on the Windows platform. If I click onto it, we're going to mention the application again that we're going to do. Right. So let's just call this. I'm going to call it the same as I did last time. So I'm going to say COMP3025, right? And we'll just call this lesson 6, right? Again, my company domain, georgiancollege.ca. Notice again, you can always modify that if you click the edit button from a package name perspective. Who remembers what Java packages were? What do they relate to from a big picture? If you were gonna say what a Java package is in your own words, what would it be, Sam?
An API, for example?
No. Next. Who's next?
Oh, you know, that's
you had a chance. Let's go. Ben, what's a Java package? Yeah. Man, Jeremy, what's a Java package?
Get your app and sort.
No. Yes. What's a Java package?
To organize your project.
Yes, that's true. But what is it? What is it? If I was gonna put in your own words, Jean-Claude, Java package.
Oh, it's a namespace.
Oh, thanks, Sam. It's a namespace. I was hoping to get that. There we go. That's what it is. It's a namespace, right? It's a module. Yeah, it is. But I wanted that. I was hoping for namespace, right? So if you think about a namespace, right? Here's another question. In Java, how are packages laid out? So if I start doing a package in Java, like for example, this package here I've named ca.georgiancollege.comp3025 lesson 6. How is that laid out from a folder structure on the operating system? This is our review from when we did Java. Does anyone remember that? Actually, it's 3 separate folders. It's okay. It's 3 separate folders. The first one is CA. The second one is Georgian College. And the third one, down inside, it goes kind of like they're all nested within each other. The third one is COMP3025 lesson 6. Why do they do that? Yeah.
Namespace, Microsoft's way of saying package.
It's true.
So
Namespace, package.
Namespace of answer.
Because package, right, is Microsoft's way of saying package, but namespace is the way we say it in JavaScript, we say it in C++, we say it in a bunch of different things, right? So we don't just use it just for Microsoft, right? That's Microsoft's way of saying package, but we also say it in other places. Namespace, but I want you to say namespace is equivalent to package. That's all I'm saying. So as long as you understand that. All right. I was looking for the keyword. That's what I was looking for. Someone said the keyword, and Sam did. So Sam gets Sam looked it up on the web, right?
I didn't do that.
Oh yeah. You watched them look it up. Okay. All right. So that's how they're organized. So when it looks at project locations, you decide where you want this project to be laid out. Right now, it looks like it's in whatever project folder you want to put it. You can actually click on this to browse to wherever you like. Notice how I have it under my. I have a bunch of different applications that I've tested before, and they're just on the same Android Studio projects. For now, what I want to do is I want to lay this out somewhere on the desktop so I can see it. So I'm going to kind of go to the desktop, and you can choose to do how you want to do it, but I'm going to put it somewhere we can see it together. Right. So here's my desktop, and if I want to lay out a new folder, right, as an example, so I want to go to create a new folder up here. I got some limitations in terms of what I can do, but notice on the top where this little button here, this icon, this one here that looks red, right? On my end, I'm not sure how it looks like on the PC. It probably look very similar because they're pretty good IntelliJ about setting stuff up. Click New Folder on the desktop, and I can put in the folder name. I'm going to put in Android Studio Projects. That's going to be my folder that I'm going to put it in, so we can find it again. So there's Android Studio Projects, and it's COMP3025 lesson 6. Okay. It says project location should not include white spaces, and that's just an Android Studio thing. So I'll just kind of, I'll put that together. So it's Android Studio projects, no spaces, right? And click next. Okay, from a phone and tablet perspective, you can also choose Wear, TV, Android, Auto, Glass, and so on. Obviously, we're not going to do these in this course. That's out of scope. I want you to step back in time a little bit. Instead of doing what we did last time, we set up a, kind of an Android Marshmallow application. Things have changed, by the way. From around the time that Lollipop came out, right, or even KitKat, they were playing around with KitKat. We were using a totally different way of deploying applications back in the day. And if I had the Linda video to play for you guys, right, it would basically show you. We've moved away from just-in-time compilation architecture to almost like it's a different thing that's called ART. That's what it's actually called. And the ART system, what it does is it loads your applications a lot faster with anything after Android 4.4 KitKat, right? So a whole different way of loading up applications, right? I want to step back though. I want to see if we can get to it. I've asked you to kind of download some of these. If you haven't had a chance to download it, you can download it now. Let's get back to Android 2.33 Gingerbread. This is kind of one of the most stable ones that are out there still today. So if I click on Gingerbread, notice that it says, by targeting API 10 and later, your app will run on approximately 100% of the devices that are active on the Google Play Store, right? So that's pretty cool. So from a backwards compatibility perspective, Gingerbread is pretty stable. That's API 10, okay? I'm going to click next. The activity we're going to choose again is the blank activity. There's a blank activity and there's an empty activity. Don't choose empty activity because we have to kind of put additional stuff in there. We want this one. And there's other ones let's use. These are all templates that you can start off your projects with, right? Yes?
Do you use ice cream sandwich?
No, I use Gingerbread 2.33. I'm going to click next. All right, notice that I'm prompted to put an activity in here, all right? So the activity name, think about it as the screen name, all right? So your first screen activity name is main activity. You don't have to call it that. You can call it whatever you want. It's still going to extend your new class, because every time you make a screen, you're creating a new class that's going to encapsulate the entire, all the logic behind your screen, right? It's still going to be based on the activity superclass. So the activity superclass is the stuff that contains all the logic and the event workflow, if you will, for Android screens, right? So that's why this is called main activity. They're calling it that way so it can derive its name from the activity superclass. But you don't have to do that. For now, we'll leave it as is, right? Now, you see the title as main activity. If that's the title that'll appear at the top of your Android application, right? So this is where you probably want to change something. So we can change the main activity, and notice how it's together. If I try and put a space in here, so instead of main activity, I put in something like main activity, right? And if I click to the next line, I'm okay with it because it's just a title, right? Okay, but it's just trying to take whatever I have here, my activity name. The activity name has to be like this or with underscores. It can't be because it's going to be used as your main class that we're going to kind of access, right? If I go back down here to main activity, let's call it something else. Let's call it our welcome. We're going to do a welcome app, right? So here's our welcome app. Right? Notice down here it says use a fragment, right? Who knows what a fragment is? Some of you may have looked at some Android stuff in the past. Anybody? What about for my other classes that we did? Intuitively, I mean, it is what it is. What it is, it's almost like a components-based system. I know you're looking at Google. But a fragment, what it really is another way of composing a screen, right? So what you can do is you can compose your applications with something called fragments as opposed to the one solid class that we use for, that's based off the activity superclass. We're not going to do that right now. That's kind of an advanced way of doing things and a little bit more challenging when it comes to laying things out. All right, so we're going to say finish. And when it comes to it, we're going to build up our new app with Android 2.33. I need to match up. In order for me to run my emulator, I have to be ready. So when it comes to creating your environment, notice how, let me close this up for a second. Yay, okay, here it is. Notice how I'm running on a Nexus 4, right? This is what it's saying. So this is my default, right? My default was the Nexus 4. Yours might be something else. Does a Nexus 4, well, Nexus 4 is the size of my actual device. It's going to try and match up to something that I have. So most of your devices, are they 4.7 inches? Just asking. You know? You care. Right? Your iPhone? It's 4.7? Because you have an iPhone 6S, right? Yeah. Let's leave it at Nexus 4. If you change it, notice that it has some defaults for how it will display. So this is kind of emulating here inside the window here. When we were in design mode, it's going to emulate the device that we have in here. That's all it's doing. One thing to note that we must change, okay? Please change from where it says the target API over here on the right. So this little Android guy, right? It's targeting API 23. That doesn't make any sense if we're building an app for API 10. So change this back all the way to API 10. Otherwise, it won't render properly. And also when you do that, on the left, the tool sets that are available to you will change depending on the API that you choose over here, right? Because some tool sets won't be available. Yes. How do you get that list? Well, you have to update it through the SDK. I'll talk about that in a second, right? So if you don't have Android 10, and notice that it says rendering problems. Here's a rendering problem that I'm getting up, right? It says, the following classes cannot be instantiated. Android support, design, widget, coordinator, layout, open class, show, and so on. If you guys get this error, right, and you may, the reason why is because it's trying to render, I'm trying to render everything in here, and usually they have a quick fix. If I was going to try and actually run this thing in this Nexus 4, it would have a problem. Notice it's trying to emulate what the Nexus 4 would look like, right? So I'm going to kind of go in here. All right, so I'm just going to click this rendering problems issue in a second. It'll clear up once I run it, you'll see. Okay, if I click the run button now, so here's the actual, just the way it is, hello world, just for a second without any changes. And if I click this run app, right, up here, it's going to say waiting for ADB because the ADB, right, is the Android emulator. Now, I can launch an emulator that I've created, and I just created this last night for my Galaxy Tab E, right? I'm using the Galaxy Tab A skin, but it's pretty much the same. I can also plug in a device, and if I plug in a device that's running a device that has a lower version of the API that I'm loading, it'll say incompatible device, right? And we'll talk about it. I'm going to show you that later on when we get together. I'm going to plug it in, and you'll see that option. So this isn't great. I mean, one is I have a choice of virtual devices, and I have a couple of them built. So where do we build these virtual devices? Because they don't get built right away. It's not like that's one disadvantage that Android has over Apple. Apple, you can choose iPhone or whatever, and they have a certain set number of devices. In Android, you've got to build out your AVD, your Android virtual device first, and then you can deploy, right? And this is why Genymotion is so much better for us when it comes to that, because they have a bunch of devices already spelled out, they're already made for us, and we don't have to try and configure those individually ourselves. We just have to download that that profile for the device, and away we go. Okay, so let's take a look at Genymotion now. So I'm going to go to my my applications, and I'm going to hit Genymotion. Right here it is. Now you'd have to log in once you get here. I've created a few AVDs here. Notice that I've got API 22 and 23 and 17. I don't have one for API 10. I got to get that. So I'm going to click the Add button over here, right? What this is going to do is it's going to look for all devices that are up here, right? Notice that the Android version I can filter, right? And the one that's that what goes back the latest is this 2.3.7, which is probably going to be okay for us. So let's click that one. 2.3.7, API version 10. I want to match it up with what I have, and they have a Google Nexus 1, right, and a Samsung Galaxy S2, right, at 400 by 800. That's probably the closest one that I want. So the Samsung Galaxy S2 is the one I want to kind of hit, this one here. And I'm going to click Next. Now, it gives you the details of the device that you're going to download. And what this is, as an example, is a, if you look at this thing, it's a virtual machine. That's what I'm downloading here, right? Now, I got to be careful. I can't have too many of these, right? Because the more virtual machines I have, notice the disk space capacity, right? It's pretty darn big. right? So we want to, the more AVDs you have, the more disk space it'll take up. So you don't want to use the ones that that you really need. Now we need this one because I need to run my Android app on something that's compatible, and that's why I've chosen that. And you notice that the virtual device name you can totally modify as you download it from Genymotion, which is kind of cool. Click next. It's going to download the files, and this takes a little bit of time. Notice that my files for the default VM is around 237 megs. You sure should be about the same if you're doing the same thing. By the way, they're all around that, 237, 300, something like that. So it takes a little bit of time to download everything. So give it a second while it happens. Luckily, we're at the school here, so it's really, really fast compared to at home. Sometimes this can take a little bit of time to kind of pull down. So once we've got this is the strategy. You set up your system. You decide what API you're targeting, and normally, I mean, typically we'd set up a newer API, but I want to show you this to set up a Genymotion at the same time, right? We're going to grab Genymotion 2 or some kind of AVD. We'd have to set it up whether you want to do it with that Genymotion or with the AVD that's built into Android Studio. I don't recommend the Android Studio AVD because the virtual machine is really slow to start up, and that is the disadvantage to me from an Android perspective. If it was bundled, if something like Genymotion was bundled with the Android Studio IDE, it'd be great, right? And that's kind of the biggest problems all developers have, and that's why something like this. And by the way, there's other ones that are out there to provide Android support. From an AVD perspective, they're better because the one that's bundled with it is really super slow. Even on the best of days, if you were to save the profile, and I'm not, who's remember when we did that? You guys, I think we did it together when we did it in our advanced Java class, right? It takes forever. It like literally takes 10, 15 minutes to power up sometimes.
Is it better to use an actual device if you have one?
Way better, but we should probably test it first before you spill it onto your own device, especially if it's a device that you're using like every day, like a phone, right? Because once you have this device in your hand, once I create an app, and if it somehow, for whatever reason, it breaks your device, which can happen, right? Or break, I won't break it, but it could cause problems with the device, right? You want to try and test it out as much as possible here. When you're ready here, your prototype here, that's the way we do it, and then we deploy to a device for final testing. So normally the workflow that we start off with is we do industry research in terms of what kind of application we're going to build and how it fits into the industry. Does an app already exist that's on Google Play or on the App Store? If it does, what differentiates our app from that one, right? Is it going to be cost? Is it going to be functionality? Is it going to be UI? What is it that's going to do that? And then once we figure out from an industry research perspective, that's the case. We start developing our plan, and our plan should be all around, looking at the UI. A lot of times, what we want to try and do, and there's some videos out there, there's some really cool tutorials that talk about using cue cards. Who knows what? I know some of you young guys, you don't know what cue cards are, but I'm just saying Sam, because especially a digital guy like Sam, right? He may not know, right?
I went to high school.
Mallory's a queen of, yeah, okay. So cue cards is a really cool way of developing a UI because, and we might do a little bit of an exercise like that, kind of later on. We take a bunch of cue cards and say, okay, I want you to develop this application. So your sponsor, whoever it is going to give you your specs for the app, right? And then you're going to start writing out your kind of designing your application by hand. Cue cards are a great way of showing screens. Each cue card would be like a screen for your Android or iOS device, right? It's easy to do this with a cue card, right? Throw it out, right? Your cue card doesn't have to be around, right? But it's hard to start writing an application, then stop writing the application, right? And then write in a different direction or change your UI altogether. Because you'll see, even with Android, it takes a bit of time to develop everything. And to rewrite everything and to reset up all your layouts and stuff takes a bit of time. Okay, so I'm done. I'm going to go to finish here. Now yours might still be going, or maybe you're done way before me. So I've got this new device, this Samsung Galaxy S2 with 2.3.7 version of Android API level 10 at 480 by 800. So an older device. All right, I want to start it now, and I'm going to click the start button to do that, right? Again, this uses VirtualBox, right? And there's different options for that. My version is using VirtualBox, so it starts fairly quickly because I'm starting a virtual machine. All right, and here it is. All right, so here's the Android device powering on. Okay, cool. We're on, ready to go. And this is what the old devices would look like, right? With the old operating system. Okay, cool. So we've got this powered on. Notice I have this powered on first. I'm gonna click over here for a second and just power this down. And now when I go back, I'm gonna say cancel, right? And if I try and play this again, let's try and run this thing. It says unknown Genymotion phone version, Android 2.3.7. Compatible, yes, right? That's what it says. And here's my serial number. Notice what the serial number is. 192.168.57.101 is an IP address for the virtual machine with a port 5555. That's what it's going to right now. Okay, I'm gonna click OK for this one. And what it's going to do is it's going to take my app, and it should deploy properly if I don't have any problems. It's executing tasks. On the bottom, notice that it says Cradle Build, right? And then bam, we've got our application running on our device. This is similar to what we did last time. You might get some build errors if, for example, from a rendering perspective, you can fix them. If there might be an area that says fix the error by downloading something that you're missing. A lot of times that's what the problem is. Okay, so these, by the way, down here, this is when it says logcat. This comes right from the old ADT plugin for Eclipse, right? So if you notice, these are all the activities that happen when my Android device and my package loads up on my Android device. You can certainly search through this and see if there's any red areas, would show you any errors that come up, right? That's what's happening here. Memory, if I click memory, the monitor is disabled, but you can certainly enable this from and same thing with CPU, from a memory management or a detailed analysis and that kind of thing. And actually, it's built into iOS as well. We just never got around to that. Not that our virtual devices will work very great in the virtual machine. It would be pretty slow. Okay, so we've got our device. Again, just to go back to the Android Studio interface for a second, right? On the left, you have your projects, right? Notice that I have also things like captures. I can click on this, captures, screen captures. My project files here. Down here is the structure, right? And again, if I was going to have in my structure view, this is for an advanced setting we'll talk about later on in the future. But the main one I want you to focus on right now is right in here where it says project. Now, how am I seeing this? Because this what came up to me. If this isn't showing for you, and as an example, notice on the top here these two X's. Let me just X out of this thing. So you might see something like this at the beginning, right? On the left where it says under your app, right? You have something called a manifest. And if I click on, if I double click on the Android manifest XML file by double clicking, right? Notice that it's an XML file that talks about, you know, what the app is about. It gives the name of the app, main activity, and it's important that you don't mess around with this too much, or your app may not launch, right? So the manifest is almost a control document that describes, you know, what's being loaded and all that kind of stuff. It names the app. And notice that it also it talks about the theme style. My theme right now for the app is my toolbar with a no action toolbar theme. You can change this, by the way. And we'll talk about theming with the toolbar, so you can pull away the toolbar, put the toolbar back, and create a theme for your app. There's all kinds of built-in themes that come with Android. Okay, so that's under manifest. We'll get back to that in a bit. Under Java, you may have these two files, or there's two sections here. Let me just open this up so you can see it. The first one, right, shows our main activity, and the second one shows our application test. Okay, let's not talk our, you know, we're not going to talk our application test for now. Let's go to our main activity. And if I double click on main activity, you're going to get your actual Java code here, right? Things that we don't need, all right? Most of this is what we don't need, right, for now, I'll tell you. So as we did last time, by the way, notice that the import statements are up here, and the package is mentioned up at the top, right, like we normally have. If I open my import statements, these are all the packages that are being imported into our application, so we can use the classes that are associated with the packages, just like normal. Okay, so this one here, this onCreate is the main method that happens when from an event lifecycle, Android event lifecycle perspective, and onCreate triggers when an application launches. All right, that's this first event, right? So we can't really get rid of this one. It can be kind of a bad thing to get rid of this first one. But we can get rid of the rest because you know what? I don't have a menu right now. And I don't have an options item selected for the menu, right? Both of these two things, by the way, are additional items that are unnecessary to load. So let's just get rid of them. So I'm going to go down from about here to down. Now notice that I don't have any line numbers in my editor, right? In my editor, I don't have any line numbers. If I want line numbers turned on, what do I do, perchance, right?
Click on the side.
Sorry?
You right click where the line number should be. And then you say, show line number.
You're beautiful, right?
That is so much easier. That is so much easier than trying to find it in other programs.
You could do it the other way too. They actually have both ways. You can do it this way, just like our lovely friend mentioned. Huh? That's where I would have gone. Yeah, I would have gone through there as well. But that's definitely the fast way to do it. What about these things here? What are all these things here that are showing? You've got all these other little icons that appear here in the gutter, right? What do you think these things are? Take a look. Android Studio 101, right? Well, if you hover over them, like I'm doing right now, it tells you kind of the connections that we have. And it says here, or a quick hint of what this thing is. For example, if I hover over this one, and I want to know what it is, it says, overrides method in Android support v7 app compatibility activity, or compatibility activity. So that's what this is. This is built in. OnCreate is a built-in event that's part of the Android event lifecycle, right? Remember we talked about the Android API. So this is the one activity that we want to keep in. I don't care about these ones, and I'm going to delete them. So I'm going to right-click as an example, and I'll cut it. They're gone. So I have this one activity that I want you to work on. And notice that I have a floating action button, right? I have a floating action button. It's that is called Fab right now, right? Here's a floating action button. And I have this really weird stuff. Take a look at the format of this button. I don't know if you guys can see this, right? It looks pretty good. In this area here, so about line 21, you have this floating action button, and it says Fab is equal to floating action button. You guys all have this? Yeah. All right. This is what I talked about before. We need to create a reference in this particular manner. So floating action button is the type. Fab would be the object. We're going to cast, so anything in round brackets like this, right, or parentheses, floating action button, we're going to cast the thing we can find by using the find view by ID method that's built in, right, to Android, and into this particular app compat activity, which is an extension of the activity superclass. It's built in, right? So if I go find view by ID, I can use something called R, and R would be the actual display, the view, r.id.fab, right? That's what it's searching for. So this way is the way we create a wire or wire up our activity. That's the first thing we do. Okay.
Get element by ID.
Exactly. And here's Fab. Here's Fab. It's all built in, right? Fab.setOnClickListener. And take a look at this. We've got a view with a fat arrow function, but here's a new view on click listener. We're going to do this exact thing for our own. Let's keep this thing for a second. We don't have anything. We don't have a Fab. Yes?
So what did you say that's called on line 21 when you're doing that? Binding or?
Line 21 is when we wire up our app, or we create a reference between a variable that we create here in class and the actual object that we have, our control that we put into our view. Okay? So we have our scene, our Android screen, right? And on that screen, we have a whatever kind of widget you have, a text box, a button, whatever, what have you, right? And all we're doing is we're creating a binding or a reference. Think about it as a wire, an invisible wire that connects our variable with the control. That's all we're doing. And once we have that reference, I can treat the variable as the control, as if I'm accessing all the properties of the control itself. All right, just like we do with any other system that we use. Okay, and just like Rich said, it's very similar to add event listener, that kind of stuff. What's that?
These guys haven't learned.
Right, add event listener. Maybe they have.
Yeah, Sleeping Beauty.
Only Sleeping Beauty? Okay. Let's try this out. So let's put something on. Now this is we're accessing main activity. Let's go down to where it says res, right? Which is actually resources. Notice that there's drawable. We're going to talk about what drawables are. There's layout. Easy. Easy.
This program is so frustrating.
Menu, I'll come around to that in a second. MIP map, which we'll talk about in a bit, and values, right? There's all these things that we have here. Notice that values, we have a colors XML, a dimens XML value. We have a strings XML, a styles XML. We talked about this before, right? If you take a look at this. Remember I talked about when you put a value in, Android doesn't want you to put a hard-coded value. It wants you to create, inside the XML document, it wants you to spell out the value that you can reuse over and over again. It's better to reference that. And the reason why they do that is because if you hard-code it in and you want to make a change, you got to go throughout your entire application from a style perspective and change stuff. But this way, you change it in one place, and then all your values are changed everywhere throughout your app. So you can style up your app a lot quicker by using this methodology. And I like this thing. I like this thinking, right? Apple does it too, but they don't force you to do it as much as Android. And I like the fact that we can do it here in Android in kind of these XML documents. We'll come back to that in a second. But the one we really want to hear is this activity main XML, this one. Activity main XML under layout. Right? If I double click on that, I get two parts to it. Notice on the bottom left, there's design, the design side, where it says rendering problems, and the text side, right? Here's the text side. The text side is the XML version of the document, of the actual view, right? So there's two, design, where it says rendering problems, as an example, and the text side. And those are the two. Notice my view went bye-bye, right? Why did my view go bye-bye? Right? Does yours go bye-bye too? It may have. Nope. Correct. I'm using an older API version, and I'm targeting an Nexus 4 device, right? And what I want to try and target is something else, right? Some other kind of device for the view, right? If I go back and forth from my design perspective, right, and if I kind of zoom out, as an example, you may see that fix. One of the biggest problems we had with Android in the past was this exact problem, where we didn't see the device at all. Because, sorry?
Like if you have it on 23, it shows you just keep it on there just to see it.
I can, but the problem is my device that I'm pumping out,
yeah,
it'll change the widgets and everything else that I see on the left-hand side. So I'll do it. So if I go back to 23 as an example, right, it goes back to my device, it's my Nexus 1 device. But what I really want to do is target an older device, right? That's why we have rendering problems, because the rendering piece is just giving you an idea of what it may look like. That's why I told you it's better to run it in an emulator, right? And it's always better to run it on an actual device, a phone, right? So we notice that there's a bunch of different built-ins that come with this thing. Like, for example, a Nexus S with that's 4 inches, that's 480 by 800. If I click that one, here's my Nexus S. And if I go back to API level 10, right, still tells me rendering problems, right? Because it says that something's not right with the skin that I'm using and my API level. That's what's happening here. So going back to what you're saying, if we just want to see it, right, let's go back to API version 23 for a second, or something earlier like KitKat 19 would be fine too. And if it doesn't, like for example, it says ignore this for this session, you can do that. And I can still skim back to API level 10, right? And I can do the same thing. It should say ignore this for this session. Sometimes it doesn't. But it could be.
Well, one was a warning and this one's an error. So
Yeah, this one you can't get rid of, because you see the other one, this is a legal exception error because of my API version, right? So yeah, I could put it back to 23 or 19. Let's leave it at KitKat for now. Just go so we can see this thing. It's not going to affect the end result, right, when we render. But just keep in mind that the boxes on the left will be impacted by the API version on the right. Okay, that's all I'm telling you. All right, so notice that we have a hello world here like we did before, right? And notice also that we have some other things here. A custom view. Remember, because this is an earlier API version, right? The API version that we're using didn't have the relative layout that we're used to, right? Here's the device screen, and we have a custom view, right? Here's a custom view. And inside that, we have a fab, right? Which is also a custom view that we're kind of accessing. So let's get rid of all this and see what happens. Let's just, let's be rebels. Get rid of this whole thing. So I'm gonna right click and just get rid of it. Just press delete and see if we can kind of get rid of it.
Mine does say layout.
Mine doesn't. So I don't know if you guys see the same thing, but see if we can get rid of this thing. Come on, let's just copy or cut it.
Is it delete? Press delete button.
Yeah, I'm pressing it, man. Yeah, I'm pressing the delete. I'm pressing delete. Here we go, delete. And I want to press, there's no way to delete this one, this custom view. How come? Right.
Delete button.
Dude, there's no way. Look, there's not even an option for that. Even if I go here and go to the option, I can't see a delete. Right. So here's my custom view, right? You might see the same thing. Does anyone see the same thing as I do? Yeah? Custom view? Okay. I want to pull in a relative layout like we did last time. We saw we had a relative layout. So I'm going to pull that in. And I want to see if this works, right, for my device. Here's my custom view. And I'm trying to pull in a relative layout, and it's not working. It's failing. How come? API 10, API level 10, right, is not working. And if I go to something else, like a linear layout, right, so here's my linear layout, and I try and pull it over here as well.
Just run sudo rm slash. Right on there. I'll get rid of it.
This guy. So it doesn't seem to be working no matter what I do, right? Let's go back to my design section from my text perspective. Notice how on my, it says Android widget on my XML layout, right? It says the layout width is match parent and all this kind of stuff. And somewhere in here, when it comes to layout, it says fits system width is equal to true, context, right? So this is where this says this custom layout is right here. That's what this thing is doing, right? So it doesn't give it also gives us a little bit of a preview of what it's going to look like over here based on the API level we chose earlier, right, with the Nexus X, right? But I can't, if you notice, I can't do the same thing as I did before. I can't, you know, with my custom layout, I can't do anything. If I drag a button onto the screen like this now, or even over here, it's going to error out. It won't allow me to do it because of my view issues. How do I undo this? I made a mistake. You know, I messed up. What do I do to get it back? So I want to try and I'm going back to API level 10 for a second, and let me go back to API level 19 as an example as well. If I undo, and if I keep undoing, right, there's going to be a point in time where you get this. Even if I want to undo beyond a certain point, I can't. Because I went too far. I actually deleted some key points, and I switched between screens. I went from XML, the XML view to the actual view layout, and that's what caused this. So I can't fix it. How about if I just drop in a relative layout or a button now? Can I do that? Can I drag in a button? Because I had a button before. Here's my fab, by the way, this thing right here. This little thing that looks like a mail object, right? This little fab button, right? So can I kind of pull this in? Can I do a button? Can I drag it in, or a small button, or kind of a layout, or linear layout? It's broken, man. Broken, right? How about if I change this? A lot of times you can change the layout by right-clicking in most versions of the code. Right-clicking, I can change the layout. But here, there's nothing I can do. Even if I refactor, extract style, or extract layout, or do something different, there's nothing I can do to fix this problem. So what do I do now if I was going to start off? Start over, right? Okay, let's try this again. So I'm going to kind of, and we're going to get back. I also want to kick off our GitHub stuff, because there's ways of initializing GitHub. Up here on the top, notice that our version control system, we can kind of enable our version control integration up here, right? This is where GitHub kind of enables when we kick it off. But for now, let's get back and just redo this whole thing, right? It's good practice anyway. So I'm going to quit Android Studio for a second.
I should install it. I didn't install API 10 when I set up.
We're not going to use it. We're not going to use it.
To install it.
No, I'm showing it because, well, if you didn't install it, don't worry, right? I'm showing it because if someone wants to develop it, you know, we're good to go. I'm going to kill my virtual machine, because I've got this virtual machine I use just for this piece, right? So I'm going to kill it and go back in to Android Studio. Let's try this again. So remember, that one was the most stable version, it said, right? The most stable version. My loading. Now, the last time I loaded my project, right? Here's my configuration, and I kind of come back in here, and lo and behold, everything is back. How come? Right? Because you said we're going to start over, right? No. Reset. Sometimes, not just for Android Studio, but even back in Eclipse days, when you were to restart your project, right? Sometimes the view itself was out of sync with the XML documentation. So the XML description, which is the text field down here, take a look at it. Here's your XML doc, right? And the XML doc, what it does is it describes what's going on over here. Okay. So I have this hello world object here, right? Here it is. But notice how on the right, I'm not getting any properties the way I used to before. as I click my options down here, this is the Fab Custom View Android widget that we're getting, right? And the reason why this is incompatible is because it doesn't exist for this API version that we've got loaded in. We're using API version 10. Okay. I still cannot drag any kind of relative layout or any other kind of layout with this custom view, right? So I can't do that. I can't draw a layout. And right now it's preventing me from dragging and dropping a button. Yes. Is that where I'm in right now? Well, there you go. That's different. Thank you. All right, thank you for that. Let's go back to my relative layout. And that's why you guys were seeing relative layout and I wasn't. And I was like, what the hell? All right, here's my relative layout. There we go. Now, if I click on my button, notice that on the right here, I get my properties, right? So there's all my properties for my button, right? And notice on the right, I also see my relative layout over here as well. And I still have this text XML document that describes my layout, right? In here, you'll see things like the layout type and the width of the layout, which is wrap content. These are just enumerations that we use, right? And we're going to access later on. And on the top here where it says relative layout, see this relative layout right here, you can change this in here in the XML. Or if I was to right click, right, as an example, you should be able to refactor this to a different kind of layout altogether, or double click. Typically that's how we do it. For now, let's leave it as relative layout. Here's our text view, which is our hello world. We're going to rename this thing, right? Because right now our text view doesn't have an ID, right? So if I skip down to where it says ID on the properties menu on the side here, I want to rename this thing, and I always want to rename all of our objects so they're friendly for us. So for example, we're going to make a welcome app. Might as well call this the welcome label, right? So we'll just call it welcome label, lowercase, like camel case, welcome label. It's not a label, it's a view, but that's what it's going to be. So that's kind of what it's going to be, right? Okay, I want to change the size of my welcome label. And last time what I did was I went in here and, well, here's the text. Let's change the text. But if I change the text, notice how these little ellipses on the right? If I click on the ellipses, it takes me to something called resources. And it shows me a bunch of different kinds of resources that are built in. And this is where I can store things like hard-coded values like, you know, this string, hello world. I don't want to ever store a value like this, hello world, in here. I want to kind of create a set of resources like on the left here where I can, for example, my strings.xml has a resource. Let's go. My string is app name, and then here's the value. This is just regular XML right here. So this is under strings under values, right? So if I go to values strings, I can put the value for my app, right? So I can name that in there. I can kind of put in there a string. So type it in name, and the value for my or the name for my for this string would be something like, you know, the welcome string, right? So I'd call it welcome string, right? Then I'm going to put in the actual value, welcome, right? I'm going to save that. And I've added this into my resources now. What we should be able to do now, if I go back to content main, which is here, let's kill activity main for a second. I should be able to go and choose, instead of hello world, I should be able to choose my my string down here. And notice down here it appears welcome string, right? As an option. So that is one part of my resource. And that's the way we want to do things for Android. We always want to point to a resource, like a string that's defined in an XML document, or a dimension that we've already kind of defined in our dimensions XML. So that way, like I said before, if I want to change that dimension, I change it in one place and it changes everywhere in my document from a styling perspective. Almost like, think about it as CSS, the way we do CSS, right? Here, we're just defining even our strings, everything. And the reason for that is, let's say today you're making an app and it's for your, you know, the locale we're using is here in Canada, right? But I want to use the same app and I want to have additional strings for someplace in another speaking country. Like, I don't know, like for example in Greece. I don't know, Greece is somehow having problems, but they want this app, right? And we want to deploy it in Greek, right? So then we can have a Greek version of the string that we can swap out and all the labels and everything else can have all Greek labels and everything else compared to the English labels that we have here. And that's why we do that, localization. Okay, so we click on this welcome string. I'm going to press OK. And now notice that it says, instead of my text being welcome, just hard-coded, it says string @ /welcome _ string. It's the same resource that I defined in my strings XML document. Okay, cool, that's one. The next thing I want to do is I want to define the size. So here's my text size. And I want to really do the same thing here. If I hard code a value here, it's the same, right? Like I said. So on the left, we have dimensions, right? There's two of them, right? There's two of them. And if I go to the first one, dimens.xml, and double click, right, you're going to see some dimensions. Now they're in DP, right? DP. And that's the points that we're talking about for when it comes to stuff that's being displayed on your device. It's a relative unit, right? It's not pixels, right? So it's relative to the size of your device. If your device scales, if you're going to install this application to another device that would be larger, it would scale up according to the device size, okay? All right, so let's check this out. So I'm going to put in a new XML option here. We're going to go in here, we're going to say dimen, for dimension, the name, right? A friendly name that we're going to use. And this is going to be the size for the size we're going to use for my label, right? And then let's just call it for all labels that I have on my screen. I want all of them to be like 40 pixels or 40 dp. Yes. What's the question?
There's also a way where you can click the ellipsis.
I want to do it this way first.
Okay.
Yes, I know. Better for you guys to know the XML way. You know why? If the other way crashes, XML still will work, right? And I'm telling you this from experience because, like, see how my view crashed last time? It can happen again and again. I don't want to reload my application. Okay, so in here I'm going to create a friendly name. So I'm going to call this thing my label width or label height. Let's say label height, and I'm going to call this 40 dp. Right? This is the most acceptable way of creating dimensions that we want to use, because now I can go in here and just change that one thing, 40 dp, and all my label heights will change. Right? That's the way we do it. So let's go back into my activity, right? So here's content main, and now I'm going to point to that again, just like we did before. First, I got to make sure that I save my dimensions, because that would be bad. I forgot to save. And let's go back. I'm going to kill these two things. I don't need them. Let's go back to where it says text size, and then use the ellipses to select that. So if I can actually select text size here without clicking on the thing, there it is. If I go down below where I kind of have my width, right? I want to find something that says label height. There it is. Right? There's a dimension. And notice that says 40 dp. Now I can change it if you're in here if I want to, right? But what I want to do is I want to just select it, and I've already defined it in my XML. Notice that what we're saying is if I click new resource, I can do it here too if I want to. Let's just press OK. All right, cool. Now my welcome is like 40 pixels. It's pretty large for my little screen, but that's okay. I'm going to pull this thing to the middle of my screen like we did last time, and just a little bit up a little bit more. So it's kind of just shy of being in the middle. And it's relative layout, so it's going to appear somewhere in the middle of the screen here. Right? Okay, so we've got our welcome and whatever. I want to make a link to that welcome label because I want to change it. When I click the button, I want to change the label. This is kind of the almost like our hello world of the apps to understand how we do binding with Android, right? Okay, cool. We have a name for our label. It's called the welcome label. So with our r.id searchable function that we saw as an example in our onCreate method inside the Java file, right? We should be able to search for it now here. Let's use this same format. I recommend, by the way, to make it a part, and instead of just defining it inside the onCreate function, I usually declare stuff that I want to use on my view inside as a member of my class, right? And I want to usually make it private. So up here, I'm going to say like these are my private instance members, right, or variables, right? And again, my way for doing private is using the underscore, right? That's, to me, when I look at it, I know it's a private variable. So I'm going to say private, and I know what I want. It's got to be a text view, right? So if I type, that's the type that I'm going to type in. So text view. Notice that Android will bring it up, text view. And then I want to define the name for my object. And I'm going to use the underscore, and we're going to call this thing welcome label, the same way as it says on the view. Right? Private text view welcome label. Now this text view is available anywhere in my application right now inside this particular view, inside my screen, right? In another screen, it would not be available. So if I was going to access this label, I can use the exact same variable name, welcome label, in another screen and it wouldn't clash, right? Okay, cool. So I've got this. This is just defining the variable, but there's no binding yet. We have to bind it, right? We're going to use the same methodology we're going to do it here. We're going to do it on create. So when we create when the view gets created, give it some space over here. I'm using the same methodology, right? I'm going to start binding this object. So I'm going to say this dot underscore welcome label, right? Equals to, and then what we're going to do is cast the stuff we're looking at. So I'm going to use the parentheses, and we're going to cast it as a text view. This is required, by the way. It's not optional. And then we're going to do this find by ID, or very similar to document.getElementByID. That's what it's like. It's like that, right? And notice there's a bracket, and it says, hey, show me the resource integer ID, right? Now this is the way we can do it. We can go r dot ID dot, and then it's going to look for something that's on the actual view. And what we want to look for is the welcome label that we labeled earlier, right? So there it is, welcome label, right? Now this here is where we created a binding or a reference. So create a reference to the control, right? To the text view control. I'll say text view. Control. There it is. That's what it is. It's just a binding, right? Now we haven't done anything with it yet, but we have access now to everything that is welcome label. Welcome label is now an object, and each object has methods and properties, and I can access them now. And I want to treat this welcome label variable just like it's as if it is the label itself, right? I have full control over what happens now on the screen. All right, that's good. So I need that one. Now that I've got this, I want to create a button. Right, so let's go back to the view for a second. So I'm going to go back to my content main, and I'm going to add a button underneath here. I'm just going to drag a button and kind of pull it into the middle, and pull it kind of so it's centered just right in the middle of the screen here. There's my button, and there's my welcome. And notice that my button has default text, my text. I don't want to use this. Let's do it the other way around, right? Instead of using this button, I want to make a resource. We'll do it this way this time. And if I click on new resource, notice how it automatically defaults to new string value, which is what I want to do. And where's that going to go? Inside the string.xml file. So I'm going to open the string value. And here's my resource name. I got to name the resource name. So my or you can do it by XML if you want to. My resource name is going to be called, button label, right? Button label. And my resource value is going to be whatever the button is. Like, for example, click me. Right? Click me with an exclamation mark. Notice where it's going to go. It's going to go to file name strings.xml. This is the other way around, right? And I press OK. So now I've got add strings button label, and it says click me. Okay, cool. I want to change the text size. I already have a text value, my dimension for my my welcome label, and I want to make the button a little bit different. I don't want to make it so small, but I don't want to make it as big as welcome. So let's make a new one. So text size, I'm going to click on the ellipses this time to do it that way. New resource. Now it's going to default to a new dimension value. That's nice and easy there. And it'll be the same thing. A resource name. So we're going to call this, button height or button heights. Button height is what we're going to use for all buttons. The resource value in DP, right? So I'm going to say probably let's try 20 DP for now. I'm going to go to my resource set that's main, and it's going to be to the demens.xml file, and press OK. Okay, so there's my click me button, and there's my welcome menu. And one more thing I have to do for my click me button is change its ID, because by default it gives you a button ID, which is no good. So I'm going to change this ID here to a friendly name, which is going to be the click me button. So click me. That's my friendly ID for the button. There it is. Now that this click me button is here and I've got an ID just like the welcome label, I can access it from the Java file, right? So here's my Java file. And in here, notice that I have my welcome label. I'm going to do the same thing for my click me button. So I'm going to go in here and go make it a private object. So private, instead of, now this is something you may need to do, because notice that I'm going to put in button, right? And notice on the top here with my imports, right? Once I click button and then put in what kind of button it is, and just bear with me while I do that, I'm going to call it underscore click me button. Notice that it says I'm missing an import, right? See that? It says cannot resolve symbol button. What it's really asking me to do is do this. Go in here to the import and go Android.widget.capital B for button. Sometimes it will and sometimes it won't. And I'm showing you how to take care of it. Yes?
If you hit enter when the button.
Yes, it'll come up as well. It'll come up with the object. But I want to show you how to put it in manually, right? I'm glad it came up for me this way because then you see it. So if it's missing or whatever, you can put it in. All right, so Android.widget.button is what you need here. Notice now that I have a button, a reference for button, the button class, and a click me button over here. Okay, now I'm going to duplicate what I did before. I'm going to create a reference to the button over here inside my onCreate function. So I'm going to say create a reference to the button control, right? And it'll be this dot underscore click me button, right, is equal to, and we'll say the button, and we'll say find view by ID, r.id. And then the click me button, right, which is what we've kind of defined in our view. So now we've got a reference. Once I have my reference to my button, I can add an event listener like this, which is this set on click listener down here. Let's do that. So now we're going to create a click listener for our button control. Okay. And it'll be just like this set on click listener. Notice that you don't get everything at once. If I go this dot underscore click me button dot set on click listener, take a look. It comes up in IntelliSense. I'm going to double click. All right, it doesn't give me everything. If I press Control Space, right, notice that it gives me some additional options, right? Saved instance and a bunch of other stuff that I can put in here, but really doesn't give me the form. And I'll tell you right now, this is where I kind of liked Eclipse a little bit more because it actually gave you the format right from the get-go. Right here, you have to kind of know that I want to put in a view. I want to put in a new view on click listener object that's got to be passed into the set on click listener method. So here's what you need to do. You're going to do this: a new anonymous view on click listener object. So new view dot on click listener object, and in here you got to put the curly braces to create an anonymous inner class. This is where it is right here. And notice how you have this red underline. You know why? Because you're missing something. You're missing this piece, this @override public void on click, which is what you want to try and do. I'm just showing you what it comes up to when you do it by hand. So @override, I can type properly, is @override. And then I'm going to start typing public. Let's type in there, public void on click for the button. Now, you can make it anything you want. You don't have to name it on click, but if you want to, you can. Then it's of type view, lowercase view, just like it shows here. And now the on click listener doesn't read out anymore. Is that a hand or is that a?
Yes.
Tell me.
So lambda expressions are not supported?
No.
This is the perfect moment.
Yes, I know. There's no Java 8, right? So yes, you're right. Lambda would be perfect here. And you're going to notice another problem in a second. All right. Okay, so here's my on click listener. So now notice that the stuff that happens in this little space right here. This is where all the fun happens. I want to put that in there. This is where the fun happens, right here, right? This is where you make your button do something, right? Okay, cool. I want to access, when I click my button, I want to change, I want to set the text of my label, my welcome label, right? Let's try that. So I'm going to say, I want to access welcome label. I'm going to say this dot, and I'm like, oh man, how come my this context doesn't work here? Anybody? Anybody who's watching and not falling asleep? Sorry? Not even that. Because I'm in an anonymous inner class, the this keyword is keyed to my new class, which is the view on-click listener that I'm using. I'm creating a new anonymous object, if you will, right here. This is my anonymous object. This anonymous object is considered its own class. So the this context is pointing to this class, not the class which is my activity or the onCreate function. So therefore, I cannot use the this keyword, right, to access my object. But I could use the actual object itself. I could do something like this, which is kind of weird. That's why I named it the way I did. I could say underscore welcome label, and that's why, by the way, I declare them as private instance members up here, because if I declare them as part of my class, and this is a contained anonymous inner class that's inside of the other class, the contained anonymous inner class has access to the instance members of the parent class. Whew. Like that one? All right. So welcome label dot set text, right, is the methodology we want to use, and we want to pop in there what the text is going to be, right? Now, there's two ways to do this. I can access a string value of the set text, but for now, let's keep it simple because accessing a string value is a little bit different. Take a look at what we have options to do, by the way. It says a character sequence, a nat string resource, right, with a resource ID. Take a look, right, or a buffer type. So if I click any one of these, if I click the @string resource, right, or anything else, it'll give you a kind of a hint of what to put in here. For now, let's leave it as is and put in just a string value like this. And we're going to call this clicked. Right? Simple little thing like this, clicked. There's a hard-coded string we want to try and avoid. We'll fix this later on today, right? Okay, cool. So what am I doing here? So first, let's go over the steps. Once, the first thing is I declare my object here at the class level as a private instance variable, right? Next, I declare a binding. I wire up my control. Third thing is I set up an on-click listener with an anonymous inner class. You need to do this, by the way, in Java, right? And then inside my on-click event, which is part of the on-click listener class. By the way, if you don't want to do an anonymous inner class, you don't have to. You can create a separate a class of your own that you use for all your buttons, right, that you're going to call. That would be in a separate document, just like we did in Java. So you could do, instead of an anonymous inner class, you could derive this into its own separate named class if you want to. I'm going to warn you, just like it is in JavaScript, that the performance is faster this way.
Can you turn your line numbers on?
Yeah, sorry.
So because you've declared those variables up, scroll up a bit, on 17 and 18, do you need this to reference them on 30 and?
I don't. I'm using this as a good habit. I don't need to. It's unnecessary. In fact, in some circles, it's frowned upon. Like they tell you not to use this at all, right? Because is that you're frowning? Okay.
Well, turn that around upside.
But no, you don't need to. You don't need to. Especially same thing with C#. You don't need to use this keyword, right? And same thing with in many other languages. You don't need to use the self for this keyword, but in here it just makes it clearer what it is. All right. So here, welcome.label.setText.clicked. Okay, let's try this out and see if it works. And by the way, I want to get rid of this binding here. So I want to get rid of all this stuff, this float action button. I don't need this anymore. This is just for us to take a look at as a template. So now we have everything we have in our onCreate function. I'm going to save this thing. I'm going to go back to my content main, for example, and I want to get rid of this object here, this fab. I mean, it's actually part of my other object. We're going to get rid of it later on. But there's no control. There's no control that maps to this anymore. Okay, I want to test this thing out now in my emulator. Okay, my emulator. I don't have Genymotion launched. Let's relaunch my emulator. And then I want to try it out on a device. So here's my API level 10 emulator. I'm going to run this thing. Once you run the emulator for the first time and it sets up, the second time you run it, it goes a little bit quicker. It starts up pretty quick. Let's see if I'm right. There it is. So there's my Android device, and it's up, right? It's charged up. I'm going to kind of drag it over just like it would be before, right? And now what I want to do is I want to try this thing out. So I'm going to go back here and press play. Okay, it's going to say unknown Genymotion phone or whatever it's going to say for you. It might be a little different. I'm going to click OK. What it's going to do is it's going to do its little deployment dance like we've seen before. And in my player, it should bring up my new app in a second. And there it is. And I've got a problem. Look at my click me. I've got my, why is this happening? Why do I have a difference in what I'm seeing here compared to what I'm seeing in my thing? Yes?
You want to make a trade.
Well, it's not the reason. Jeremy, what's the reason?
That's what I was
Oh,
gonna say.
well, here, if you notice, right, I have my phone, my relative layout is here. What I'm seeing here, remember we talked about this layout issue, right? What I'm seeing in one layout is not what I'm seeing in the other layout, right? Let's undo the layout change, right? So what I'm seeing here is not what what's actually really happening. If I move this up a little bit, I'm just moving it up. I'm going to save my changes, and I'm going to redeploy my app. Okay, so I'm just moving it up just a touch, right? And see what's going to happen. It's not going to kill my app. What it's going to do is redeploy, and there it is. There's the redeployment. Now it's slightly different than what it was before. Let's test it. Let's click me and see if it works. Well, oh man, oh there it is. Clicked. It took a little bit of time to do that, but notice that my event listener worked. Here's COMP3025 lesson 6 on the top. That's the name of the app, right? And this is the style. We're using this style of app that we've kind of created. I think this is a great stopping point, guys, for a little bit of a break and get some coffee into us. I know I need it. Any questions around what we did here? Just as a recap, we created an instance variable. We bound it to the control. We created an on-event listener equivalent, and then we used that on-click listener to set the text of the label. Okay. Yeah. Let me just stop this up. Hold on a second.